What do you see when you look at this artwork? The sun, stars, trees, a village in the background. In short, a scene from daily life, right? But look a little more closely at the bottom left. We see a sage passing through the curtain of the reality scene and extending his head beyond it, seeing a completely different system. This engraving, made in 1888 by the French astronomer and writer Camille Flammarion, is actually a remarkably beautiful work of art that shows us that there is a much larger realm beyond our perception of reality. Now you think about it too. We all think that the world around us is clearly there every morning when we open our eyes. The cup on our table, the light filtering through the window, the distant chirping of birds. All these experiences seem like direct reflections of reality in the outside world. But what if they're not? What if the world we perceive is actually a painting, drawn by our mind with electrical signals, and we can only see a tiny fraction of the essential reality? This thought sounds frightening at first, doesn't it? However, discoveries made at the intersection of science and philosophy suggest that reality might be much more mysterious and multi-layered than what we see, prompting us to ask this question: what is reality? Welcome to Find the Truth. We've reached the final video in the series after the Secrets of Dreams video and Parallel Universes video. If you haven't watched them yet, please pause this video and watch them first, as they are connected videos. Links are in the description. What is the true appearance of the creature we call human? Do you really think the person you see in the mirror is you? Do you think it defines you? Then you are greatly mistaken. You are actually this. Not very beautiful or handsome, right? But this is the truth. All your feelings, your conscious self, your character, are just this network. Everything else, every detail of your body, is just a sheath built to ensure this system functions properly, is nourished, protected, and developed. So how does this vast neural network, hidden behind muscles and bones, hear those beautiful sounds, see vibrant colors, and taste delicious flavors? In short, how does it perceive the outside world, what we call reality? The answer is simple: with electrical signals. Is this really red? Who knows? To most of us it is, but not according to a color sample. So can you hear this sound right now? If your ears are healthy, yes, but if not, then no, you can't hear it. No matter how sure you are of an object's hardness, you can never actually touch it. Under normal circumstances, objects cannot touch at an atomic level. These claims might sound like I've gone mad, but this is exactly what we call reality. We perceive colors because our brain codes the electrical signals transmitted from our eyes to our brain in this way. Electrical signals from the eye are transmitted inversely to the visual cortex at the back of our brain due to the lens effect created by your eye. Your brain reads and interprets this signal, flips the image to the correct orientation, and performs what we call seeing. Let's take the sound you just heard or didn't hear. Your computer speaker actually converts a digital signal into sound waves by vibrating itself, reflecting them to you. These waves enter your ear, vibrating your eardrum and the microbones called the hammer, anvil, and stirrup. Many other things happen in between, but in short, these vibration frequencies ultimately cause the stereocilia hairs to bend in response to specific frequencies, and the resulting electrical signal is transmitted to your brain, and you hear by your brain reading this electrical data. In all other examples, the system works on the same basic principle. Taste, sight, hearing, touch, all are essentially the brain's reading of electrical signals, and the brain often interprets these readings by filling in the blanks itself. For instance, you are currently seeing a room with good depth. However, this is a two-dimensional drawing. The brain does not analyze such illusions in detail and automatically interprets them, producing erroneous data because it has evolved over hundreds of thousands of years. And this simple illusion opens the door to a massive paradox, causing us to ask this question. If the brain sometimes interprets things it cannot perceive as it suits it, and we perceive them as real, what if everything it interprets is actually an illusion? After asking this question, we descend into the darkest depths of Alice's rabbit hole, which we began exploring in my previous video, and things truly start to get strange. Albert Einstein said, "Reality is merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one." Neuroscientist Donald Hoffman goes a step further, suggesting that evolution has conditioned us to see the world in a way that helps us survive, rather than seeing it as it truly is. According to this view, our brain does not transmit all the details of the external world as they are, but instead presents a simplified representation, much like a computer interface. This means that the colors, tastes, and sounds we perceive may not be exact copies of reality. They are like icons drawn by our brain to be functional. This thought brings up the question we just asked. Is the world we see real, or is it an illusion created by our minds? In fact, the world we all perceive is limited only by what our own senses and brain provide. In other words, the reality we experience is both limited and personal. For example, the human eye can only see a small slice of the electromagnetic spectrum, visible light between approximately 380 and 740 nanometers. However, infrared or ultraviolet rays outside this range also fill our surroundings, but we are not even aware of them. Let's take our ear. A healthy ear can only hear between 20 Hz and 20,000 Hz. Don't think, wow, that's pretty wide. In fact, this roughly corresponds to only 2% of the main electromagnetic sound spectrum. Perhaps something is whispering in your ear, but you have no idea. Because you can't hear 98% of this spectrum. Don't immediately connect this to ghosts. Things are about to get even stranger. In short, what we call reality is limited to only a thin slice of the energy in the universe. When we look at the world of other living creatures, the subjective nature of perception becomes even more striking. For example, bees can distinguish ultraviolet patterns on flowers that we cannot see. Snakes can see warm objects in the dark thanks to their infrared senses. Dogs, on the other hand, have a sense of smell 100,000 times more sensitive than ours. Each species lives in a slice of reality allowed by its senses. Biologist Jakob von Uexküll used the term Umwelt to define this awareness of sensory reality perception. That is, each creature's unique perception of the world. It is almost impossible for us to fully experience another creature's world by stepping beyond our own Umwelt. We cannot entirely imagine what a bee sees, just as we cannot know how a dog perceives colors. Every organism lives in its own reality, based on the information its nervous system receives and processes. Therefore, the reality we perceive is both limited and subjective, shaped by our evolutionary needs. Moreover, perceptual differences exist even within the same species, and even among humans. For example, some people cannot distinguish certain color shades. Some have the ability to hear sounds as colors, called synesthesia. For some, a very bitter taste is unbearable, while others find it normal. These examples show that the perception of reality can be slightly different for each mind. But even this, as strange an event as it is, now it's time to make things even stranger. Yes, our brain perceives colors, smells, sounds, that is, stimuli from the outside world, in some way through electrical signals. This much is clear. So how is it that when we are lying in bed, with no external stimuli, we can experience these events in the same way, and sometimes even more sensitively? Furthermore, how can we even know and experience feelings that we have never experienced? In previous videos, we saw that the brain has the power to create such reality independently of the outside world. But then, if our brain and consciousness can create this reality, how can I trust that what I am seeing now and perceive as reality is truly real? The answer is simple. You cannot. We have reached the most challenging and mysterious stop on our journey to understanding reality. The concept of consciousness. Is the phenomenon we call mind merely a hallucination, a byproduct of electrical signals? Or is it a fundamental element of reality? This question is known in the scientific world as the hard problem of consciousness. Even today, we cannot explain how the interaction of billions of neurons in the brain gives rise to a subjective experience, such as the warmth of the color red or the sting of pain. Yes, we know that certain patterns of brain activity lead to certain sensations. However, why this activity produces a subjective experience remains a mystery. Indeed, Donald Hoffman stated that no one in neuroscience has yet explained how a particular neural activity gives rise to the taste of a hazelnut or the experience of seeing the color red. Consciousness is like a shadow that slips out of our grasp and becomes undefined the moment we try to observe it. Throughout history, many scientists and philosophers have put forward striking ideas about the relationship between consciousness and reality. Max Planck, Nobel laureate physicist and one of the fathers of quantum theory, said in an interview with the Observer newspaper in 1931, "I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. We cannot get behind consciousness. Everything that we talk about, everything that we regard as existing, postulates consciousness." Here Max clearly meant that matter, and therefore physical reality cannot exist without consciousness. For a scientific pioneer like Planck to go so far as to say that consciousness, not matter, is at the foundation of reality is quite thought-provoking and profound. Even today, some scientists are putting forward bold views suggesting that consciousness almost covers or creates physical reality. For example, according to Robert Lanza's theory called biocentrism, it is consciousness that creates the universe, even space and time. Lanza argues that the physical world we perceive is not something that exists independently and externally from us. Our mind creates it when we observe it. According to this approach, time and space are merely the brain's transformation of a bundle of information into a coherent and meaningful experience. In a way, consciousness is a prerequisite for the existence of the universe. Furthermore, according to the work of Lanza and his colleagues, observers, that is, conscious beings, have direct say over the behavior of physical reality. Lanza even once used a quite radical statement saying that, ultimately, observers determine the very structure of physical reality. Of course, these views are controversial and not accepted by all scientific circles. Nevertheless, from interpretations of quantum mechanics to discussions of the anthropic principle in cosmology, the connection between consciousness and reality is being taken seriously in many fields, and these theories are becoming increasingly tangible with each passing day. In fact, as humanity, we are also participating in this inquiry with a millennia-old tradition of philosophy and belief. When I blend philosophy, belief, and science in my videos, interestingly, some types get annoyed. But write this down. Whether we see it or not is unknown. But in 2, maybe 3 generations, that is, in a maximum of 80 years, humanity will see quantum physics, philosophy, and faith intertwine to create a new scientific belief philosophy. Let this stand as my future claim. As the ancient Greek philosopher Plato described in his allegory of the cave, people might mistake shadows cast on a wall for reality. However, the true reality is understood when we break free from our chains and look outside, seeing the true source that creates those shadows and their true silhouettes. The famous story of the Chinese philosopher Zhang Zi, who dreamt he was a butterfly and upon waking asked, "Now I am Zhang Zi. Was I a human who just dreamt he was a butterfly? Or am I now a butterfly dreaming I am a human?" expresses a similar doubt about the nature of truth. In modern popular culture, one of the best examples of this, the Matrix film, strikingly presents the question of what is reality by depicting an extreme scenario where human minds live in a computer simulation. And never forget this. If a truly scientifically advanced civilization has solved all the secrets of the brain and nervous system, they could even make someone lying bound in bed live in a dream world that they truly believe is real, by delivering the necessary electrical impulses to their brain. And that person would not even realize it until the day they died in that dream and opened their eyes elsewhere. Isn't this? Yes, you can even include the belief in the afterlife within this possibility. In fact, in this approach, who knows, perhaps faith systems were informing us about this event all along. But over time, people forgot this philosophical message and got lost in the symbolic concepts they added to religion, losing the essence. I think after this video, you should examine these philosophies in light of this information. In fact, you must watch my video, The True Creator, which is one of my favorite videos on these topics. The link is in the description. Now let me deepen the matter a bit. If our consciousness creates this reality, how is it that we all perceive and experience a similar reality? More importantly, what happened 15 billion years ago when there were no humans? Or rather, which conscious being observed for everything to suddenly exist by transforming from an infinite sea of strings into matter as it should? And if we all are fundamentally experiencing the same reality with the same collective consciousness, doesn't this also mean that we are all connected and whole in some way? I'm telling you, no matter which path you take, one day science, philosophy, and faith will inevitably converge at a single point, just as everything began from a single point. Experiments in quantum physics show us how important the act of conscious observation is. The moment we observe or measure a particle, we change its behavior. This phenomenon is known as the observer effect and raises the question of whether reality is uncertain until an observation is made. As strange as it may sound, this idea has actually been supported by experiments in the quantum science world. For example, in the famous double-slit experiment, whether you look at electrons or not radically changes the interference pattern formed on the screen. It's as if nature behaves differently when there is someone observing it. On the scale of everyday life, when you look at a chair, you see and know that it is there. However, at the quantum scale, when you are not looking at a particle, you cannot definitively say where, or even when, it is. At this point, the idea emerges that reality is created by observation, not only on small scales, but even at the most fundamental level. Of course, scientists have developed different interpretations to explain these strange results of quantum mechanics. There is not yet a single definition of reality that everyone agrees upon. However, the two main approaches are as follows. The first is the Copenhagen interpretation. According to this approach, quantum systems are in a superposition state until an observation is made, meaning they contain all possibilities simultaneously. At the moment of measurement, the wave function collapses and only a single reality emerges. Thus, according to this approach, physical reality is not definite until an observer makes a measurement. Another approach is the many worlds interpretation, which I mentioned in my previous video. This extraordinary view suggests that the universe splits into different branches every time a measurement is made. This means that possibilities that do not materialize also occur in other universes. The outcome we are currently experiencing is just one of these multiple possibilities that has materialized in our universe. Thus, reality becomes a larger structure, formed by countless parallel universes. This intellectual journey, exploring the boundaries of the universe, ultimately leads us to a single conclusion. Reality is never as simple as it seems. The electrical storms in our brain present the world to us as a shaped experience. Our senses capture a small drop from a vast ocean of existence, and we call that drop reality, sometimes walking around with arrogance, thinking we know everything. However, at the quantum level, the raw material of reality is essentially probabilities. When we look, the wave function collapses, and we see a concrete reality. But perhaps other possibilities continue to live in other universes. So then, the thought comes to mind. If we can control a brain that creates reality, can we also control the reality it creates?
No.
In the depths of space or beyond its dimensions, there may be layers that our eyes can never directly perceive. Look, what we now call the universe, all those infinite galaxies, stars, that is, all matter, actually constitutes only 5%. We don't know what the remaining 95% of the universe is, and we can't even understand it with our current technology. You can imagine the mystery. Science, with every answer it provides regarding the secrets of existence, actually brings forth new questions. Ultimately, reality seems to be a continuous process that exists with us and is constantly being shaped, rather than a fixed, rigid thing independent of our minds. Indeed, as philosopher Alfred North Whitehead said, the universe is not made of solid objects, but of events. Everything is part of a process, and we are part of that process. So even when looking at an ordinary tree on an ordinary day, you might think, is this tree really standing in front of me? Or is its existence a reflection of my consciousness? And then for my sake, ask this question. Why am I in front of this tree right now? Or why did this tree appear before me? Does it have a meaning? This is a simple example, of course, but if you have watched all the videos I've made over the years, you will understand that your being there at that moment is not a coincidence, and that you might need to learn a lesson from that moment. In short, look at everything in your life as an observer as well, and draw lessons. This way, you will mature, and your perception of reality will significantly increase. After all this information, I think we also need to consider this. If consciousness creates reality on a micro and macro level, and if our brain has the power to influence matter in the creation of an overarching reality, then could our outlook on life and our thoughts somehow be preparing the good or bad things that happen to us? This possibility reminds me of this beautiful story. A man would pray every night, "God, give me patience, give me patience." However, throughout his life, troubles and problems never left him. After he died, the man asked his creator, "I prayed to you every day, but trouble never left me. Why did you do this?" The creator replied, You constantly asked me for patience. So I sent you scenarios that required you to be patient. That is, your wish was granted. Now after this parable, think again. If your brain has a creative power in the system, I think you should be careful what you wish for, because you might be the one creating it yourself. Remember, by asking these questions, humanity, who once said that gods were angry when lightning struck, can today decipher nuclear fusion in the cores of stars. This progress happened thanks to minds that always wondered and questioned, not thanks to minds that said, "Don't invent trouble, don't question, you'll fall out of religion, or just obey." In this universe, which exists as we observe it and takes shape as we think, we may never fully solve the ultimate secret of reality. But nevertheless, what we learn along the way can shed some light on the immense mystery of the universe, helping us to understand ourselves better. After all, remember, knowledge is knowing knowledge. Knowledge is knowing yourself. I hope this series helps you question events from different perspectives and broadens your horizons. And through this, you will see how valuable the journey called life is, and how full of mysteries to be solved and discoveries to be made. It was a beautiful 3-part series. If you have any details you're curious about regarding the topic, please write them in the comments section. Perhaps we can continue to delve deeper into the topic together by doing a live broadcast addressing questions about this series and having a conversation. If you like the content, please don't forget to like the videos, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. See you in the next video. Take care.